Welcome to the Las Vegas Review-Journal Judicial Primary Debates. Here's your host, Victor Jakes.
Hello, I'm Victor Jakes. Welcome to the Las Vegas Review-Journal's Nevada Judicial Debate Series. Today's debate is between the two candidates running for Nevada Supreme Court Department D. Joining me are Assemblyman Ozzi Fumo and Clark County District Court Judge Douglas Herndon. We'll start by giving each candidate 1 minute to make an opening statement. Assemblyman Fumo, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Victor. And I hope everybody is staying safe and practicing social distancing, but thank you for giving us this opportunity. My name is Ozzi Fumo, and I'm running for Nevada State Supreme Court Seat D. I'm a father, I'm a grandfather. I've lived in Nevada for 45 years. I've practiced law for the last 24 years. I'm the managing partner at Pitar and Fumo Chartered. Being a managing partner means I'm the one who pays the taxes. I'm a small business owner. I pay the health insurance. I sign the front of the check. I've spent my entire career fighting for hardworking Nevadans, both in the courts and at the legislature. I'm uniquely qualified for this job. I've handled both family, civil, and criminal cases to verdict. I've argued before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. In 2006, I was honored to receive the Pro Bono Award from the Nevada State Bar. In 2013, I was appointed by the Clark County Commission to be the presiding hearing master for police fatality fact-finding review boards. And in fact, I adjudicated the CC's Pizza case. I was elected to the legislature in 2016, re-elected in 2018.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. Judge Herndon, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Jakes and the RJ for setting this up for us. And like Mr. Fumo said, I hope you all, your listeners, your readers, your viewers are all staying safe and healthy. I moved to Nevada 30 years ago. And it was immediately apparent to me that if I was willing to work hard, I was going to be provided with opportunities to succeed and to make a decent life for myself and my family. So I decided to stay here and commit myself to public service. I'm very proud of the fact that I served in the district attorney's office for 14 years, where I ran the special victims unit, and that I have been one of the top-rated district court judges for 15 consecutive years and 11 years as a chief judge. I don't have any ego about who I am or what I do, but I do have an ego about my work ethic. I've been working since I was 12 years old, and I've done everything from clean toilets to be a chief judge. I know about hard work, and I know what it means to reward people for the trust and faith they place in you. And I can assure the people of this state that my work ethic, my skills, everything I've learned in 15 years as a district court judge will come into play as they trust me to be one of their Supreme Court justices.
Thank you very much, Judge Herndon. Assemblyman Fumo, we'll start with you. Will you describe your judicial philosophy, including if you view the Constitution as a living document or if you believe a judge needs to uphold the original meaning of the text?
Well, I believe a judge needs to interpret the law, follow the text of the law, but I do believe the Constitution is a living, breathing document. In 1776, when the founders drafted the Constitution, they felt that Black people were only worth 3/5 of a person. They felt that women didn't have the right to vote. As we evolve as a society, as the times change, the Constitution needs to be adjusted and interpreted accordingly. So I do see it as a living, breathing document.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. Judge Herndon, same question. You know, the district court is supposed to follow the precedent set by the Supreme Court. You're running to be on the Supreme Court. What's your judicial philosophy?
I'd say there's three parts to that. The first part is understanding that there are three branches of government, and you have to abide by that in doing the job as a judge. You're not a legislator or a politician. You're not part of the executive branch. You're there to apply and interpret the law. I also kind of have always abided by the four things that Socrates talked about 2,400 years ago with regard to judges. You listen courteously, you answer wisely, you weigh things soberly, and you decide impartially. And beyond that, always, always, always keep an open mind. You never know where you're going to find that piece of information that's critical to good decision making. I believe our founders were incredibly wise in how they defined our democracy. And it's incumbent upon us to give meaning to the exact language of that document. But even they would admit that you can't anticipate the future. And we have to be enlightened, and we have to give meaning to where we are in a society now as we interpret the provisions of that document.
Thank you very much, Judge Herndon. And you'll get this question first. I wanted to ask you specifically about the separation of powers, which you mentioned. The Nevada Constitution lays out distinct roles for each of the three branches of government. Would you share your thoughts on how important, if at all, the separation of powers will be to you as a Supreme Court judge? For instance, is it ever appropriate for the Nevada Supreme Court to tell the legislature how much money it must spend on certain activities?
Well, look, under Canon 4 of the judicial ethics, it's improper to comment on things that can potentially come before the court. That's something that's come before the court in the past, obviously. But I believe very strongly in the separation of powers. I believe very strongly that the courts have to give meaning to what our legislature does and respect the decisions that they make and the laws they enact. It should be rare to overturn a law as being unconstitutional unless it's just so appropriate on its face. But in terms of the Supreme Court getting involved in demanding that the legislature take any particular type of action, I think generally speaking, that's inappropriate. The Supreme Court is there to interpret and apply law and oversee the state's trial court system, not to insert itself into the role of the legislature or the executive branch.
Thank you, Judge Herndon. Assemblyman, you're in a different branch of government right now. You're in the legislature. But you're running for the judiciary, would you give us your thoughts on the separation of powers and how important that will be to you for a judge? And I do want to pose that same question. Do you think it's ever appropriate for the Nevada Supreme Court to tell the legislature how much money it must spend on a certain activity?
You know, again, because of the canons of ethics, we can't comment on a particular case that may come before it. But the founders have the three co-equal branches of government for a reason, and they each have a checks and balances on each other. You have the executive branch, which is checked by the legislature and the judiciary. You have the judiciary, which the legislature and the executive can check, and then you have the legislature, which the executive and the courts. The courts interpret the laws that the legislature makes.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman Fumo, and our judicial primary debates will continue in just a moment. You're watching the judicial primary debate for Nevada Supreme Court Department D. It's part of an ongoing series of debates produced by the Las Vegas Review-Journal to inform local voters about these important races. Assemblyman Fumo, you spent the last 4 years in the legislature. You have a lot of legal experience, but you've never served as a judge, whereas your opponent has 15 years of experience on the bench. Wouldn't it have been better for you to run for district court before running for the Supreme Court?
No, that's a great question, but absolutely not. You know, I'm not the first person to run for the Nevada State Supreme Court who goes from private practice to the court. Justice Pickering most recently did it, and we've had other justices do it before that. There is no requirement to have a hierarchy to make a judge go from private practice to justice court to district court to the appellate court. You know, we don't require Judge Herndon to go from district court to the appellate court. He's going straight from district court to the Supreme Court if he wins this race. The only requirements are that you have 15 years of experience and that you are an attorney in the licensed to practice law in the state of Nevada.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. Judge Herndon, in the Review-Journal's Judging the Judges survey, 85% of lawyers recommended that you be retained. Is the equivalent of a B grade deserving of a promotion to the Supreme Court?
I guess the numerical grade is dependent on what all of the grades were. I was very proud of the fact that I was in the top 5 in retention rating, and more importantly, that I had the highest rating in terms of performance rating of any judge in the 2019 surveys of the 32 district court judges, and that I've been a top rated judge for 15 consecutive years. I look at it in terms of the longevity, not any one given time period in which you're rated. I do think experience matters. You look around our community, our state, our country, our world right now, people in critical positions, the public deserves to have people with experience in those positions. The Supreme Court is an incredibly busy and complicated court, even more so in the next couple of years because of the things that are being pushed off right now. And you have to be able to step in there with the understanding and knowledge of how our state's trial court system works to be able to do that as an effective and competent jurist immediately.
Thank you very much, Judge Herndon. Assemblyman Fumo, in your time at the legislature, you sponsored a bill to abolish the death penalty. You've also voted for increased restrictions on firearms to increase the power of labor unions. If you're elected, would you recuse yourself from cases involving issues where you've taken a political position?
As a attorney, you're an advocate for a position. As a legislator, I'm an advocate for a position. But as a Supreme Court justice, I'm there to interpret the law for the cases that come before me. For instance, we don't have a district attorney who becomes a district court judge say you can't do criminal cases because you practice criminal law for your entire career. You're an impartial person at that time. I'm impartial to the facts and apply the law to those facts as the cases become before me.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. Judge Herndon, before becoming a judge, you worked as a prosecutor for many years. Should voters be worried that you won't give defendants a fair shake if you're elevated to the Supreme Court?
No, I don't think that's a concern at all. When I first became a judge, I was actually an all civil case judge for the first almost 3 years that I was on the bench. And then I had a split docket for the last 10 years, and for the last 2.5, I've been the chief judge over our homicide case team that I created in 2017 to address a critical need in our community. When you have top ratings for 15 straight years, that's being rated by everybody: civil bar, criminal bar, prosecution, and defense. I think I've been a very fair judge. If anything, I think I hold the state to a higher standard because I know how to do that job and I know what the expectations are. But I think I'm very familiar with the issues faced by criminal defendants, whether it's pretrial detainees, sentencing issues, parole, and probation. And I could continue to oversee those things as a Supreme Court justice.
Thank you, Judge Herndon. I will start with you on this question. Politicians in Carson City and Washington, D.C. have pushed criminal justice reform efforts that have reduced jail sentences. If an appropriate case comes before it, should the Nevada Supreme Court look to do anything to reduce how long people spend in prison?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think it's incumbent upon us to be involved as a judiciary with a number of statewide criminal justice reform issues. It's the same thing as becoming more enlightened as a society and constantly looking at things that may need to be changed. It's never good to just stand pat and think things are okay if they're not broken. We always need to be looking at fixing them. I've been involved in the Administration of Justice Commission that was first created back in 2006. I've been involved and still am in the Indigent Defense Commission and the Pretrial Risk Assessment Commission, which have all sought to identify ways to get people out of jail where appropriate for low-level nonviolent offenders. And there's been a big push going on over the last couple legislative sessions, as well as through Supreme Court work, to identify those crimes that can be reclassified to allow for lower sentences or earlier releases for people in custody, and I very much support that.
Thank you very much, Judge Herndon. Assemblyman Fumo, same question for you. Should the Nevada Supreme Court be looking to reduce how long people spend in prison?
Yes, absolutely. When I was at the legislature, we tried to have some reform go up there. I too have been on the Sentencing Commission, on bail reform commissions, and we have to do something to shorten the sentences. We have to get first-time nonviolent offenders out of custody faster. The Nevada Women's Prison is 90% full of first-time nonviolent offenders. We don't need to warehouse them. We need to rehabilitate them, give them some training, and put them back to be productive members of society. We spend $1 billion warehousing people. We have 15,000 people warehoused in the state and spend billions of dollars warehousing them every year. If we could take that money and put it towards rehabilitation rather than incarceration, we would be saving the state a ton of money, as well as doing good for society, because these people, like I said, they just need rehabilitation, a lot of them. If they're violent, they need to be probably warehoused, but if they're nonviolent and sometimes first-time offenders, they need to be rehabilitated and not incarcerated.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. Stay tuned. This debate will continue right after these messages.
The Vegas Nation podcast is your source for all of your Las Vegas Raiders news. Subscribe and get fast takes and smart coverage. Download the Vegas Nation app and check out vegasnation.com to stay up to date with your Las Vegas Raiders.
For all your Raiders news, like us on Facebook, download the Vegas Nation app, and go to vegasnation.com.
Welcome back, and thank you for sticking with us. You're watching the judicial primary debate for Nevada Supreme Court Department D. Assemblyman Fumo, we'll start with you for this question. One of the most well-known decisions in the history of the Nevada Supreme Court was Gwynn v. Legislature. In 2003, the court ruled that the requirement for the legislature to fund education superseded the requirement that tax increases receive a 2/3 vote. Did the Supreme Court make the right decision?
You know, I don't want to. I think the Supreme Court did make the right decision. I think if it as cases go through the system, and when there are wrong decisions that are made, they're usually overturned. And I think that goes back to your separation of powers issue. Getting involved with one side over the other is something that we don't do as a society, right? That's why we have a checks and balances, but we don't have one side telling the other side normally what to do. But that issue is going to come back up with the modified business tax vote that was in the legislature this last session. I'm sure that's going to come before the court. Depending on the law and the facts, I couldn't tell you how I decide. I think the canons of ethics would prohibit me from doing that at this time. But I understand exactly where you're going with that question, and it's a valid question.
Well, I thank you for that answer, Assemblyman. Judge Herndon, same question to you. Did the court get it right in 2003?
So look, the court got it right because the majority of the court decided that was going to be their opinion. I don't want to violate the canons of judicial ethics, obviously, but here's what I can say. One of the things that you learn as a juror in a case is that there's so much more information that goes into a decision in a trial than the public ever knows about. There's also that much more information that goes into a Supreme Court decision than ever gets into the written and published decision. I respect very much the people that were involved in that decision. I am sure there was a lot of discussion in conference about what that decision was going to be and the various pros and cons of it. And without being there, you don't really have a flavor for exactly what went into that. As I said earlier, I think that the court needs to respect greatly the legislature and what the court's role is and not interfere with the legislature. But 4 justices of the Supreme Court decided that was an appropriate decision. They're good people, and I respect that.
Thank you very much, Judge Herndon. This next question will start with you, Judge. Among lawyers, the Nevada Supreme Court has a reputation for deciding cases narrowly, which has left Nevada without much case law. Does that concern you, and what would you do about it if elected to the state Supreme Court?
I think it's frustrating, and I'm sure Mr. Fumo would agree. It's frustrating as an attorney, and it's frustrating as a judge when a case goes up on appeal and a decision comes out leaving a lot of things unanswered. They answer a finite question, or maybe they answer a question that's going to result in a reversal, and they leave a lot of other things unanswered. But you also have to understand that there are finite issues presented to the court, and it's their job to address those issues and not everything that they may want to address in their mindset about how attorneys or judges should be doing things. So I respect that process. I would hope that particularly with this Supreme Court, if I'm elected, it'll be the first time in my memory that the Supreme Court has been dominated by very recent trial court judges, meaning at least 4 of us would have been very recent trial court judges. And I think it's important to have that on the Supreme Court to be able to relate to exactly what's going on at the trial court level.
Thank you very much, Judge Herndon. Assemblyman Fumo, same question to you. Is the Nevada Supreme Court giving lawyers enough case law?
You know, I think they are, and what's helping it out is the appellate court. Right now, a couple of years ago in the legislative session, we voted to have the appellate court. Originally, it was going to go from 7 Supreme Court justices down to 5 to have the 3 appellate court justices. They kept it at 7, thank goodness, added the appellate court. And because of that system, now we're getting more efficiency from the court. We have what we call in Nevada a kick-down system. So a case goes from district court up to the Supreme Court, kicked down to the appellate court, if the Supreme Court chooses to do that, and they're making decisions on their own. So with the addition of the appellate court, we're streamlining the process. We're becoming much more efficient.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. Assemblyman, we'll start with you. The Supreme Court has a lot of power. If you're elected on the Supreme Court, what is one thing you want to change about the judicial system?
Wow, how much time do we have?
A minute.
Okay. I've been thinking about this question a lot. Being a new person, I'd be one of the only people that coming from private practice who's actually done a jury trial within the last 10 years on the Supreme Court, right? So I have a lot of advice on how the trial courts are run from a practitioner's perspective. For instance, one of the things we could do that they do in other states is at the justice court level, we track into a specific justice court, say Justice Court 1, and their docket is full, and Justice Court 2 right next door might be more efficient in running through their cases negotiated. I think we should have a system where the justice courts can transfer cases like we do in district court to have overflow. And that would make the system a lot more efficient. Having a justice court get to transfer it over. If it gets bound up, then it goes back to the track it was in Justice Court 1, but we could all help each other out at that lower level to be more efficient. I've got other ideas, but I see my time is up.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. Judge Herndon, same question to you. If you're elected to the Supreme Court, what's something that needs to change?
Well, one of the things I've prided myself on as a judge is being very efficient and being very proactive about finding ways to increase efficiencies in the court. It's one of the reasons I created our homicide case team. In the last year, I also was involved in getting a rule change through the Supreme Court to allow us to begin conducting criminal settlement conferences. We've done them in civil cases for a very long time, but only now did we start doing them in criminal cases, and they've been very effective at resolving cases, but they had to stop because of the pandemic. I would hope that if I'm on the Supreme Court, I could work with my colleagues to bring a criminal settlement conference model to the Supreme Court like we have with civil settlement conferences when cases go up on appeal. I think it would be very effective. I also think that I could use everything that I've done proactively in addressing caseloads to bring efficiencies to the district court to also increase the efficiencies of the Supreme Court.
Thank you very much, Judge Herndon. And stick with us. We'll be back for our final segment in just a moment.
All your listeners and followers, the best name of any podcast in the world is podcast.
Nobody's ever done it. Nobody's ever faked
Not that we know
death.
of.
No.
When you work with Prince, you got to get used to the fact that he changes musicians like underwear. You know, like
Tom Brady. And Tom Brady, he's a quarterback in the Boston area.
I'm not sure who you're talking about.
Alexa, play my flash briefing.
Here's what's new in today's news.
Stay in the loop of the latest information in the Las Vegas Valley with the Las Vegas Review-Journal Flash Briefing. Every day, we will provide you with everything you need to know in news, business, weather, entertainment, and sports. Go to the Alexa app and search LVRJ News Briefing. Then say, Alexa, play my flash briefing to hear 3 minutes of the most important information in Las Vegas.
Welcome back for our final segment. Thank you for being here. You're watching the judicial primary debate for Nevada Supreme Court Department D. Judge Herndon, this last question is to you. What is the one characteristic you have that makes you the best candidate for the state Supreme Court?
Experience and humility. That's two. I'm sorry. I think experience is very, very important. But also the fact that I've been very highly rated as a judge means I've learned the experience and learned the apprenticeship of becoming a judge. And as I said, I'm very humble about what I do and how I do it. I don't have any ego about who I am or titles or anything. I just work very hard to be prepared, to be honest, to be compassionate with people. And
Thank you. I apologize. This was a lightning round. I only had 20 seconds. So I'm Assemblyman Fumo, same question to you. What's the one characteristic that makes you the best candidate for the Supreme Court? And I only got 20 seconds.
Ability to listen and my ability to be fair. Since he had two, I wanted to.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So we'll go right to closing statements. Judge Herndon, 30 seconds.
All right. If I could leave everyone with anything, Victor, it would be this. I think it's easy to define ourselves by accomplishments and accolades. The thing that I would consider my greatest accomplishment, in 2014, when you all interviewed judicial candidates at the Review-Journal, you asked them all the same question. Which judge would you model yourself after if elected? And what you reported was that my name was the name that came up most often, indeed, in almost every interview. And that spoke to me that I'm doing the job the right way, that people, they respect my preparation, commitment, humility, independence, and compassion.
Thank you,
that
Judge.
to the Supreme Court.
Thank you very much. Assemblyman Fumo, 30 seconds.
Thank you for your time. Being a Supreme Court justice is about being fair. It's about applying the law. It's about understanding legislative intent. It's about knowing legal theory and legal philosophy. I was born to do this job. I know how to interpret the law. I've been in the trenches for the last 24 years. I teach as an adjunct professor at UNLV's Boyd School of Law. I teach trial advocacy. I teach opening statements and closing arguments. And I teach pretrial criminal litigation. I'm uniquely qualified for this job. I've handled civil cases, family law cases, and criminal law cases. I've been endorsed by every major union. The court marshals who are in the courts every day have endorsed me. Firefighters, teachers, and nurses have all endorsed my candidacy, and I'd appreciate your vote.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for being here. I thought it was a really informative, interesting debate. And thank you for watching this edition of Nevada Judicial Debates. Remember, you can find this program and more information on all the judicial races reviewjournal.com. I'll see you next time.